the road to work. Yesterday I was talking about bucking the system and ending the political and secular tyranny, but I didn't much get into the overall systemic problem that we see in what I call churchianity. That's a big player in it too. But my problem is this: most people are good and incredibly naive, and they think that just by showing up one day a week in a building that has obelisks all over it and put some smiley glad hand up in front of them to give them their perspective on their relationship with Christ, and they pay their 10% worship tax, that somehow fills up their righteousness quota for a week. And you've also got the C&E group that only shows up twice a year. They send their kids and they send their wives, but they only show up to fill the minimum requirement or the minimum obligation. The rest of the time they spend on the golf course, yucking it up, doing business deals. That level of complacency isn't going to work much longer. That level of ignorance isn't going to cut it. I got a friend who put it to me this way. I thought it was really clever. It says, churchianity, nothing personal, it's just business. I thought, wow, man, that pretty much nails it. That pretty much nails it. And some people will think, oh, well, this guy's just hurt. He must have had a really bad church experience. We're all having a bad church experience. We're not being given the truth. We're watching these kingdom builders, not building the kingdom of heaven, but building kingdoms unto themselves and getting fat off the fleece of the flock. I go to some of these churches, man, and I see the congregation. Half of them are living in squalor, and half of them are, some of them are living, above the poverty line, and then you've got the elders and the board members who all have, successful businesses and this and that, and that's fine. And then you see the pastor's house, and you're like, wow, you're really living it up, man. Have you been to such and such's house? Does that make you feel good? You should be living so high on the hog and off of his back. And people will probably criticize that comment. You say, hey, you should be able to, you should, pay the man of God for his services. I think the guy needs to go out and get a real job and become part of the congregation. I don't think any one man needs to be up in front of you, standing in the gap between you and your relationship with Christ. I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. I think I think if a pastor or somebody is a real minister, he's going to have a day job, and he's going to be reaching out to people on a human level, not this, super righteous guy who knows more about the Bible than you. And I understand most people aren't even going to read their Bible, and that's why we're so far from the first century apostles. That's why we're so far from them, because we don't bother to enlighten ourselves. We don't bother to read the Word and get our own understanding. We look to others to do that for us, because apparently we're too busy slaving to get a firm grip on the really important issues like our spiritual walk. And so, our culture is physically dead because we're spiritually vapid in this culture. So I say stop feeding the smiley glad hand who says he cares about you, but I really wonder, does he really care about you? And pastors, you can either agree or disagree with me. I think the whole system's a fraud. It's a business model. It has nothing to do with real worship, real Christianity, or real anything. It's a fraud. It's a sham. It's a hollow facade. People are always, always seeking more understanding, but never coming into a full knowledge of the truth. We keep people, the so-called leaders keep people spiritually ignorant so that they'll always have an income base. Of course, the pastors themselves are spiritually ignorant because they never really learned anything in the theological cemetery. All they learned was Business 101. The business of running a church. I talked to some of these guys. They spent very little time learning the Hebrew language, learning the Semitic roots of what the Bible's actually saying, and spending all of their time in Western theology, which is a total sham and a joke. It's farcical. I remember having the last conversation I had with what I consider to be a serious pastor, because he actually had a day job, but was looking for that extra couple of members to kick his salary into overdrive so he could quit that day job and just become a full-time pastor. Anyway, he I was telling him, this is at the point where I was ready to forsake all of this for the sake of my relationship, and I told him as much. I said, I'm ready to hang all of my religiousness for the sake of my relationship with Messiah and the Creator. And his answer was, well, even Messiah understood the need and the importance of a religious system. I just sat there coldly, staring into his eyes, and I said, okay, this conversation is over. And mind you, I was one of the worship team leaders, one of the ministry leaders. I was taking this stuff seriously, and I was having a serious conflict of interest. Needless to say, I stopped going to that church pretty quickly thereafter because my walk with Christ was so far removed from the Christian walk. And I remember all these people saying, "Oh, if you start keeping commandments, you're going to lose your salvation." I said, where in the Bible does it say that? Where in the Bible does it teach that if you start doing what God asks you to do, that He's going to hate you and damn you, and you'll lose your salvation? That's counterintuitive. That's doublethink. So you need to watch these 501c3 corporate organizations. They do not have your best interest at heart. They teach a false gospel that has absolutely nothing to do with God's purpose for your life. They keep you spiritually shallow and running around chasing your own tail, teaching doctrines of men instead of teaching the commandments of Yahweh. That you don't, I do clearly remember the commandment being given, you do not add to nor take away from these words. And this isn't just an isolated thing directed just at Christians. I'm talking the same thing to these Jews in the synagogues. You guys are not getting the Torah. You guys are not getting it. You're getting Talmud, you're getting Kabbalah, you're getting Mishnah, you're getting all the teachings of all these other rabbis that came before. It's a joke. It's a sad, pathetic joke. And you guys are being given the runaround. And I'm not criticizing you. I'm not judging you. I feel sorry for you. I don't want to be standing there in front of the Maker and you say, well, why didn't you do these things that I asked you to do? And you say there, well, I didn't know. My pastor didn't teach me that. My rabbi didn't tell me about any of this stuff. And he's going to hold out the book and he's going to go, you should have known. I made it very clear. If you just bothered to read and come to your own conclusions, you wouldn't be in this position. I think there's grace. Grace sufficient. If love is, if love is love, I think His grace is sufficient. Because you're really only responsible for the knowledge you receive. But if you have that knowledge and you don't change, well, it's on you. So consider that a warning. Not for me. I'm not warning you. I'm as far as I know, I'm lumped right in there with you. I may be one of those people that's outside the door, gnashing and wailing, saying, Why? Didn't we prophesy in your name? And he's standing out inside going, good. Get away from me. I never knew you. All you practicers of lawlessness.